Welcome to The Authentic Dialogue. Today's book review is Memory Man by David Baldacci. Memory Man is a book about crime, mystery, grief, and really good character development. The main character, Amos Decker, is an ex-detective with a very special skill set. Before he was a detective, Decker was an up-and-coming football star who suffered a horrifying injury during his first ever football game. Suffering from a traumatic brain injury, Decker was diagnosed with two extremely rare medical conditions. 1. Hyperthymesia. I think I got the pronunciation right. The ability to remember his memories in vivid detail. Basically, never forgetting anything. Which basically served him well as a detective because it made it impossible for him to forget anything about a crime scene or an interrogation. 2. Synesthesia, a neurological condition where his senses overlap. For example, when you hear a sound, you see a color. The nature of the brain injury meant that Decker was left with an altered personality, diminished social skills, and difficulty processing emotions. So after all this, he decided to become a detective, and he was quite good at it. Then, tragedy strikes. Decker returns home one day to find his wife, daughter, and brother-in-law murdered. The investigation does not lead anywhere and the killer is not caught. This incident shatters Decker. Overwhelmed and overcome by grief, his life spirals out of control. He loses his job, becomes homeless, and is basically an unhealthy, depressed mess. The main plot consists of two storylines: the murder of Decker's family and a local high school shooting. Decker is busy numbing his pain through binge eating and seedy private detective work, but the local high school shooting brings him back to the real world. Now comes the weird part. Right before the shooting, a man walks into the police station and confesses to the murder of Decker's family. Now Decker tries to get answers and gets caught up in everything that's happening around him. Even though he's no longer a detective, Decker's special skills are valuable enough for the police to request his help in the investigation. This leads to the discovery that the murder of his family and the high school shooting are connected. With the help of his previous partner, a plucky journalist, and an FBI agent, Decker tries to solve the mystery while also dealing with his big bag of issues. Before we continue, please show your support to the channel by subscribing, liking the video, commenting, just basically interacting. You can also follow the page and me on social media. The links are down below. Getting back to the review. You know those common crime story tropes in entertainment? The sad, smart detective with a brutal backstory who needs a shitload of therapy but is definitely the only one who can solve the crime. Other detectives can go hang themselves. The female detective who's either a hard ass with something to prove or just nags the sad detective to talk about his emotions. Plus the FBI agent who might just be annoying or evil or the killer or just a plain douche. This book contains some of these tropes, but surprisingly, you don't hate it. Memory Man is an honest book, sometimes uncomfortably so. There is no filter to Decker's grief. You can see that this is clearly a man who has never dealt with his pain. David Baldacci does his best to stick to Decker's personality, where he's not able to process or express many emotions like regular people do due to his brain injury. I have to be honest though, he reminds me of House. The entire time I was reading the book, I just kept picturing House in my head. Decker has difficulty accepting sympathy or pity because he has a hard time feeling them himself. He also lacks social skills, just like House, and has the habit of suddenly walking away when hit with a brilliant idea, again like House. It makes him come across as somewhat numb or a jerk, which is true to how his disorder impacts him, but it does not make him come across as unsympathetic or disconnected from all the terrible things happening around him. It's a fine line to walk, yet it's done brilliantly by Baldacci. It's helped by the fact that Decker is described as self-aware and logically knows that his reactions and emotions are not exactly the norm. The supporting characters do an incredible job. They're not just clones of one character with different names. Each character has its own personality, which makes you want to either hug them or smack them in the face with a cactus. And they're not entirely useless. There's major character development happening. For example, the journalist who initially trashes Decker but is later very apologetic and helpful, plus the FBI agent who develops a personality beyond, this guy is everywhere, he must be the killer. Plus everyone says he can solve the crime, but let me put up every roadblock possible. And the mystery was top-notch. It was nothing like I imagined it to be, to the extent where I felt a little embarrassed by how off I was. It's really hard to find something to dislike in this book. But if I'm going to be picky, it would be the description of Decker's family. The book does not really explore who they are beyond the fact that they've been murdered, and it makes me feel almost numb towards them, which sucks because I want to feel something about every aspect of a book. I wish we got some anecdotes to actually make me like them beyond them just being empty characters furthering the plot through their deaths. Now this next part is for people who have certain reactions towards body issues. Decker is overweight, extremely overweight. He becomes that way after his family's murder through an unhealthy lifestyle and depression and binge eating. Basically, he eats his feelings away. Baldacci really likes to describe just how fat he is, how much he binges, how fat he is, how badly his clothes fit, how fat he is, how his belly bulges, and just so you get the point again, how fat he is. It's described a bit graphically, but it's quite accurate, and it shows just how much Decker's life has been overtaken by his grief. Also, this book is part of a series, and I've read the next 2 books already. I couldn't stop. It's a really, really good series. Final thoughts. This is the first ever book review for my channel. Coincidentally, it's also the first book I've read by David Baldacci, and I do not regret it. I didn't specifically choose Memory Man for a reason. It was just a book that was lying around home and it looked interesting. I'm a huge fan of murder mysteries, but I'm quite cautious about them. Either I don't feel a connection with the characters, which makes me very unsympathetic towards them and done with their shit every 5 minutes, or I know who the killer is halfway through. Thankfully, this turned out to be a book that actually knows the meaning of mystery, and it was written really well. I almost felt like I was sitting there next to Decker while he was going through his shit and binge eating and just basically trying to be as awesome as he could be, even while he was suffering. Reading time. It took me about 2 nights to read this book, but you can definitely do it in one day. It would take about 3/4 of a day, and you could try ignoring the rest of the world, take a few breaks for snacks, but yeah, it can definitely be done in one sitting. I'd rate this book 4.5 on 5. That's how much I loved it. I definitely don't regret reading it, and I'm sure you will enjoy it as well. Plus, it's a good book to give as a gift too. This brings me to the end of the review. If you like the video, please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Also, leave a comment if you've read the book or if you have any other suggestions for me to read. Thank you for watching, sending you lots of love and hugs.